Hi, I'm Valerie Espinosa, your Public Regulation Commissioner in District 3. With us today we have Craig O'Hare, who works at the county, and they're lucky to have you. You were there, what is your title these days at the county?
I'm Energy Program Specialist, and I've been there a couple of years now, actually. And nice to see you on the PRC Commissioner. Obviously, I've known you for a while, and it's great to see you in your new capacity.
I'm really engaging and working hard, getting your money's worth out of this commissioner
As
here.
you did when you were our county clerk.
That's right. I miss everybody over there. You know that we had this program in the past, and so we've transitioned from interviewing candidates and county and city elected officials and state officials, and now I'm trying to relate this program to the PRC and interview, our employees and interview advocates like yourself. Yesterday we had a meeting and we're trying to integrate community solar somehow, some way, and you and Commissioner Holian and City Councilor Wurzburger were there yesterday, and Boucher, along with other leaders in the community, and we can kick today off by talking about community solar and what your intentions are and how you're working with the utility companies to get there, and how you want to get buy-in from the community to also go there. So talk about that for a bit, and then we'll get into other topics of renewable energy
Great.
and everything that you're doing at the county these days.
So you're talking about community solar, and just to make it clear to the viewer, it's separate from what we might call rooftop solar or customer scale solar. So, and we're talking primarily here about solar electricity, solar photovoltaic systems, not solar hot water systems. Rooftop solar is self-explanatory. It's the people who have the financial capability and have the sun on their roof to be able to just go ahead and buy a solar system, a 3 kilowatt system or what have you.
When you say the capability,
well, I mean
like
the capability, like
Kit
A, they have
Carson?
the ability to finance it.
Right.
This is for someone who wants to put it on their home or business. That's what I call rooftop solar. So I've got a little.
So you're jumping into rooftop before solar comes.
Well, I'm trying to distinguish it from community solar because
Okay.
that might not, to the viewer, they may not understand what community solar is about. So rooftop solar is basically separate from community solar. That's when I own my house or I own my commercial business and I go ahead and put a solar system
And you
on my
have
roof.
panels on your home?
I
think
have,
you mentioned that one day.
exactly. I have 1.5 kilowatt
How does that
panels.
work?
It's great. It's wonderful. I get all the electricity I need from my little tiny 1.5 kilowatt system.
For your
And
household?
For
your
my
entire
house.
household.
Now I'm on the grid, so that means that sometime my solar system is delivering excess solar power onto the grid, back onto PNM, which PNM pays me for it. And then of course at night, the solar system's not working, and then I use PNM's infrastructure and their power plants to keep my lights on at night. But over the course of the entire year, basically, I produce all of the kilowatt hours that I use from my roof, and PNM, if you will, ends up being kind of my battery storage in a way. So I can rely on my solar power that I've generated at night. It's a great arrangement.
How does it work in terms of your monthly utility bill, and what difference have you seen?
Well, I basically now get a check from PNM rather than the other way around. So I get about $10 a month. I generate a little bit more electricity than I actually use. And so with what's called net metering, which is that whole meter spinning backwards thing, plus an additional incentive that was set up under state law as an incentive for...
You took
advantage.
You took advantage of that.
So that's rooftop solar and customer scale solar. And for anybody who has a lot of sun on their roof, in other words, they don't have trees shading it, they're not in Santa Fe's historic district where it actually starts to get a little bit problematic sometimes, but not always.
Because?
Well, basically because there's restrictions in the historic part of Santa Fe on having things that are visible from the street that are not historic. Now, basically solar electric systems, for the most part, if you have a flat roof, don't violate the historic preservation
Do
conditions.
associations prohibit you from doing that? Let's say, let me give you an example, maybe Park Plaza. Are there restrictions with associations?
No, and in fact, there was a state law that I worked on when I worked for Governor Richardson that prevents homeowners associations from having restrictions on solar. That's against the law. The only place that solar really can be restricted are in these historic districts. But the good news is that solar systems can be built on a flat roof where you have those parapet walls where basically you can't see it from the street, and therefore there's no restriction on...
How do they put them on let's say, a flat roof? I mean, does it interfere with your roofing in your home?
No, and that's the neat thing. I have a flat roof, and so the neat thing about these different types of solar systems are, if you have a flat roof, and we all know, those of us that have a flat roof, that they're prone to leaking. They're not the best thing when it comes to roof leaks. And so flat roofs generally should get, like I have on my roof, what's called a ballasted system. Ballasted meaning weighted system. And so the solar system literally just sits on top of my roof, and it does not have roof penetrations. It's not actually physically connected to the roof. They just use basically cement blocks on the racking system that holds the photovoltaic panels to keep it weighted down. And as a result of that, they don't tilt them quite as much as they would with a system that is connected to the roof because of wind issues. You don't want to tilt your panels a lot. But as a result, then they're not very visible. You can't see my solar system from the street. And so if you're in a historic district, and I was just at the Santa Fe Home Show advising people about, because they were in the historic district, gee, does that mean I can't have a solar system? And the answer is no. The answer is you'll probably want a ballasted system where they don't tilt it a lot, where they're not visible from the roof. But and for renters, of course, renters don't have a financial incentive or ability to put a solar system on the roof. So that's where we get into community solar. And community solar is like a solar garden. And it's like, okay, we're going to build a bigger solar facility out on a vacant lot or on a piece of city or county land, say 1 megawatt or 2 megawatts. And then people can actually buy, in essence, 3, 4, 5 panels, however much they can afford, and get the same benefit as someone who had a solar system on their roof, that net metering benefit I mentioned, but without actually physically having to have the solar system on the roof. Some people may say, gee, I've got an old roof, I'm not ready to replace my roof, and you don't want to put a solar system on an old roof because it just doesn't make sense, because at some point you're going to have to take it off. So community solar project and program is a way for renters who don't own their building, or this is really important, commercial businesses that don't own their building. A lot of commercial businesses lease their building. And so there's not a direct relationship between them making an investment in solar on the roof of this building they don't own and their electric bill. And that's where community solar comes in. And so that's where the meeting we had yesterday was the county is interested in seeing community solar happen. The city's interested in seeing it happen. PNM has some understandable concerns about having community solar be put up all over their service territory. And so we're trying to work out an arrangement that works for PNM and also works for the subscriber, for the citizen or the business that might want to buy into something like that.
They talked about the locations of these centers or the gardens. Where might they be proposed if indeed it goes through?
Yeah, as far as location goes, they really could be anywhere. I know the city has some specific sites in mind. I mean, the good news is we have great solar throughout Santa Fe County. So it's not a matter of, gee, we have good solar here. And
it seemed to be a question of
that's not an issue.
Location.
With wind power, that's a very different story about where we have good wind for those little wind turbines or whatever. But solar, really, it can go anywhere. The county's got some great land to put it on. The city's got some great land to put it on. I know the city has talked about maybe doing it out at the Buckman Direct Diversion Project. And that would be a neat place because that's a city and county project where we bring the water up from the Rio Grande, and that's our new source of supply that we just turned on a couple of years ago. And so, or it could be a number of locations. We could do 2 or 3 megawatt projects throughout the, kind of greater Santa Fe area, and that would work. So community solar is just sort of another way of really increasing the amount of solar in our community, not just for environmental reasons. Of course, those environmental reasons are important, and they're important to the county commission, but also for economic development reasons. A lot of jobs are created by putting on rooftop solar in these smaller community solar projects.
You wanted to talk about promoting renewable energy and energy efficiency. Now's your chance to talk all about it, and that's what you're doing at the county, right?
That's my main job for the county. I'm the energy program specialist, and it follows up on basically having a similar type job.
They're lucky to have you.
With Governor Richardson. Thanks. I'm loving it. I'm loving working for the county, and I as you know, I used to work for the state for 8 years, and I really like local government because it's much closer to the people. I mean, when I worked for the state, I worked with lobbyists and attorneys and, the coat and tie crowd basically, which was fine. But I
Now
really
you're down
enjoy,
to earth.
I enjoy working with the regular folk, the citizens that are paying our way. And so, yeah, I've been doing that 2 years, and I wanted to emphasize one of the great myths about solar power for the viewers at home, and that is a lot of people have this perception that it's still really expensive, and that while they'd like to do it and it's the right thing to do, that it's just out of their financial reach. And that used to be true 5 or 6 years ago, but it's really no longer true now. Solar's less than half the cost it was about 5 years ago. I mean, my little system only cost $7,500.
You have one panel, or
Well, I have 6 panels, and
And
it
one's
amounts
each one?
to about 6 panels amount to about 1.5 kilowatts, 1.4 kilowatts actually. And I'm not a big user. I live by myself, so that was enough to basically supply all of my home.
but did you pay for each separate
No,
panel?
it was all one
For about
package. I had one
6,500?
company come in. I mean, they couldn't have taken more than 3 hours to put it in.
I'll be.
I had it done early last year, and now I just did my taxes. I'm going to get $3,000 back in tax credits, because there's a 10% state income tax credit and a 30% federal income tax credit.
Will you get that one time or
So one
next?
time, so that's $3,000. So my $7,500 system just became
Half.
a $4,500 system.
Almost.
Really, I mean, people think, gee, it's tens of thousands of dollars, and it's really
I
not.
thought that.
Yeah, and a lot of people can just buy a 2 kilowatt system for $10,000. They'll get $4,000 of it back in tax credits, and literally, just like I am, start to get a check from PNM. And it's a really great deal. There's some good loans out there. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be able to just pay for it, but not everybody's in that situation. And actually, HomeWise here in town, which is a low and moderate income home provider and mortgage provider.
I should interview them.
You should
Yes,
definitely interview
yes, yes,
HomeWise.
yes.
They have a great energy efficiency and renewable energy program. And they'll offer, if your household income is $104,000 a year or less, which clearly
Yes.
that's a lot.
Try
That's not
50 or
just-
less.
That's not just low income.
Sure.
They will give 4% loans for as long as 30 years. And the sooner that people act on it, the better. But here's how cost effective that program comes out. So if you go in and buy, say, a $15,000 solar system, and then you get a loan from HomeWise for, say, 4% for 20 years or 30 years, your loan payments, your monthly loan payments to pay off that solar system are going to be lower than your reduction to your P&M bill every month. So this is actually a cash positive, smart financial thing to do from the very first month of having that solar system on your roof. So people think about, well, gee,
You're convincing me.
isn't this a 10-year payback or a 12-year payback? And it's like, well, no, not really. When you look at it the way I just laid it out, which is that you get this loan, and your loan payment may be $40 a month, but your reduction to your P&M bill may be $50 or $60 a month. So that's like immediately financially a good thing to do. And then on top of that, your home is worth more. There's been a whole focus on green appraising and green appraisals. And in fact, the Santa Fe Community College, where we're filming this, has done green appraisal workshops for appraisers. And so this has really started to become a really significant component of adding value to a home, just like a swimming pool does or a hot tub. So when you put a solar power plant on your roof, not only are you getting that immediate benefit on your electric bill, you're also getting this benefit of when you sell your house, you're going to get something out of that system as well. It's really great all around, and I just wanted to kind of highlight the myth that it's too expensive. It used to be just for the well-to-do, and it wasn't that long ago, but now it really is.
You've been pretty convincing.
Yeah, no, it really is, and I'd be happy to talk to anybody. As part of my job is just helping people with solar and energy efficiency and giving them advice, and hopefully they'll put my phone
And you
number
might
and my
want to
email.
come to the commission and present before them as well.
Sure, I would, but that's the big news, is that a lot of times there's when it comes to renewable energy, there's all this focus on the big giant wind turbines that are out on the eastern plains. And that's great. We have a great wind resource, and PNM and the other utilities have bought into a lot of those big giant wind turbines. But the good news is people can generate renewable energy right from their roof, and it's very cost effective.
All right. Well, now you've maybe convinced me to do the same. But again, my home is an older home, and I haven't seen very many of those panels in my neighborhood.
Well,
And maybe that's because
I forget.
they're hidden.
Do you have flat roofs
Flat
there?
roof.
Okay. See, that's the thing, is they're not visible. You could never see my solar system unless you get on a extension ladder and go up on my roof, because they're not pitched a lot. But frankly, there's still not a ton of them out there, and I think it's because people just
Reluctant.
think that they're too expensive. And with this HomeWise loan, and there's actually some other loans out there, it's really kind of a no-brainer. And the other thing that's really neat about it is that you are basically insulated from all future P&M rate increases. So we all know that electric rates are going up, and in fact P&M's rates have gone up over 30% in the last 5 years, that more than likely something like that's going to continue. But when you're getting all of your kilowatt hours from your solar system, you don't want P&M to raise your rates, but if they do, it doesn't affect you.
How did you know you needed 6 panels? You say you're,
But yeah, well, it's very simple. And these solar companies, we've got great ones here in town, and there's ones that are headquartered out of Albuquerque, but they do a lot of work up here. They will basically do all of that analysis for you.
based on the size of your home?
Well, based on your electric usage. So they'll get a year's worth of electric usage, and essentially, so my electric usage was in the maybe like 160, 170 kilowatt hours per month. A lot of people, that they can't relate to that, but if you go and look at your P&M bill, and not just at the dollar amount, but you go up into the little graph, you can see how many kilowatt hours a month you use. And then essentially each kilowatt, megawatt's a very big system, each kilowatt of solar power generates about 140 kilowatt hours a month. So my system generates a little over 200 kilowatt hours a month. And like I said, I use about 160. So I'm a little bit of a net excess generator. And I did that deliberately because at some point I may go to having an electric vehicle that I plug in at night. And so of course my electric usage is going to go up.
So you allowed for that.
So a solar company could come to your house and they would basically get approval. You'll sign something saying, give this company my P&M, give them 12 months of my bills, and they'll say, if you want to be on 100% solar power, here's the size system that you're looking at, and here's how much it'll cost, and here's how much you'll get back in your tax credits and things like that. And it's really just an amazing...
So it helps you get off the grid.
Yeah,
which leads to...
now you're not technically off the grid, of course, and that people it gets a little bit confusing, but as long as you're physically connected
the majority
to P&M,
of your usage is getting...
Exactly. You're still connected to the grid, and you need the grid.
You have to be
because of nighttime, right? So the minute that sun sets, my solar system's not doing anything for me.
But it takes what, 80% off, 75, maybe
well,
less?
it takes, see what happens is that it actually, I generate more kilowatt hours over the course of a year, my usage, than I use. So what happens is during the day, like right now when we're filming, my solar system is creating a lot more electricity than what's going on at home. Of course, I'm not there. Maybe my refrigerator's turning on a little bit, but that's about it. So during the day, when on a sunny day, I'm a big net excess generator. My meter, if you go out and look at your meter and there's a little disc that's spinning around, it's actually spinning around backwards. It's actually delivering electricity back out onto the grid that I'm getting complete credit for. Now when I get home and the sun sets, my solar system's not generating anything. And in fact, it's kind of fun because my system is hooked up to the internet. I can go on the internet and I can look over the course of the day how much it's really fun, when you're an energy nerd, it's really fun to look at stuff like that. I'm a geek when it comes to energy, probably in other ways too. But so it's fun to watch the production over the course of a day, and it's also fun to watch the change in production over the course of the year. Because of course, our days in June are really, really long, and therefore our solar systems are generating a lot more. And then our days in December are really, really short. And so in June, my system is generating almost twice what it is in December because the days are so much longer and the sun is higher in the sky. So it's actually generating more electricity on my panels than in December when the sun's low in the sky.
That's fascinating.
So it's neat. Yeah, it's really neat.
And I guess where I was going with the grid and getting off of it was the topic of global warming, AKA, you know, people, that it seems to be a bad word when you use global warming versus climate change. I guess that's the politically correct way to use.
Yeah, I understand. I don't think it's so much that global warming isn't politically correct. I would just say that it's not, it doesn't convey what's really going on.
And people need to realize how serious it is.
Exactly.
And I was hoping you could go
Sure,
there.
no, I'd be happy to.
In your
So the
capacity.
global warming, there's all these international climate scientists out there. In fact, they're part of an international effort called the International Panel on Climate Change. And they've essentially come to the conclusion, which I firmly believe and am concerned about, that A, climate change, global climate disruption is happening, and B, it's primarily happening because of human-caused greenhouse gas emissions. And those are primarily carbon dioxide associated with burning fossil fuels, coal, natural gas, and then oil with our vehicles. Now, there are some people that don't believe that, and they can point to a few selected scientists and say, no, you know, it's not certain, blah, blah, blah. But you know, to the extent that any science about something as complex as the globe's climate can be, you know, can be a certain science, I'm convinced that they know what they're talking about. They've done the research and the computer models, and this is very, very much a severe concern and an urgent concern.
If we don't
Now,
do something to address it, what next?
Exactly. And so global warming is technically correct that on average we are talking about the Earth's average temperature warming up over time. But that doesn't convey really what's going on here. And that is, even climate change, I feel, doesn't really convey the right message, if you will, because to a lot of people, change is positive. You know, politicians run on a platform all the time of change. And so I like to call it global climate disruption, because that's really what we're talking about, is we're talking about taking a climate globally, you know, and climate's sort of a collection of all weather. Weather's sort of a more specific term for climate. But it's basically taking the climate that we've enjoyed as humans over the past thousands of years that's been fairly livable, you know, within a reasonable range of temperatures and not having a ton of temperature extremes and not having a ton of weather extremes, but be they hurricanes or floods or blizzards or heat spells or things like that. And basically, all the climate change models say is all of these weather events are going to be more extreme. Not just the hot events, but also cold spells and blizzards and flooding, and that there's a real concern that the climate that we're handing over to our children and our grandchildren isn't going to be nearly as livable and productive even. There's a lot of concerns around, are we going to be able to grow the amount of food and grain and things like that it takes to feed a population of almost 8 billion people if we have dramatic weather extremes all the time. And so the solution to climate change and global climate disruption is to try to get off of fossil fuels as quickly as possible and get on to these basically renewable energy, which doesn't produce any greenhouse gases, and that can be wind power, that can be solar power, that can be geothermal power. We've got a lot of great energy and heat in the earth we're not taking advantage of, and some other things, and energy efficiency, which is another purview of the PRC, the Public Regulation Commission, is trying to make our buildings more energy efficient. So one of the things that a lot of people talk about that don't really feel that climate change is a concern is that they have this notion that if we shift our economy away from a fossil fuel-based economy and toward renewables and energy efficiency, that it's going to negatively impact our economy. And basically that's a myth. That's not an accurate statement in my opinion. There have been studies that have shown, particularly if we focus on energy efficiency first, because it's so cost effective, that we can actually make this transition to what a lot of people call the new energy economy, one that's renewable based and not fossil fuel based, without negatively impacting our economy. It's going to be a transition. It's going to be a change in the way our economy works, just like it was a change when we went from a horse and buggy type individual transportation world to an automobile based transportation world. And there were some winners and losers when that transition happened, of course, the whole horse and buggy industry didn't do too well when Henry Ford and Chrysler and those guys came along, except for the ones that maybe were able to make that transition as far as the products they manufactured.
You're thinking of
But-
getting an energy or an electric car.
Right.
How would that work for those of us who, have never really, I've ridden in one
Well,
once,
electric cars,
but do they only go from this point to this point
Well,
without having to charge the battery
It's a
again?
great question, Valerie. And one thing, and it's kind of interesting because I was just talking about the transition from horse and buggy to automobile.
That's
100 years ago, right now, there were just as many electric vehicles on the street as there were internal combustion engine gasoline vehicles.
100
And
years
they
ago.
were 100 years ago. And even
That's
after,
news.
yeah, it's a news to a lot of people. Before that, there were actually some steam automobiles, but those gave out at the end of the 1890s pretty much. But electric vehicles and internal combustion engine, gasoline vehicles and diesel were duking it out for market share right around 100 years ago. And even after Henry Ford was making a mint off of the Model T, he was working with Thomas Edison on electric vehicles. So to answer your question, electric vehicles, their limit right now is electric-only vehicles, and not talking about hybrids here, but electric-only vehicles, generally have kind of a 90-mile range on them. So the good news is that 90% or so of all passenger travel is less than 40 miles a day. So 95% of the time, for those of us that are just going to and from work and the grocery store and the soccer games or whatever, 90 miles is plenty.
How about if you're going to Las Cruces? Is there a station to stop
Well,
and
no,
plug your
see, that's
vehicle in?
it's a good question. And so in those circumstances, that's a real constraint. And they're working on either increasing the range or increasing the speed with which they can be recharged. But if you think about it, for families where they have two cars, it would be ideal to have at least one of them be electric. And so I really think electric vehicles are the wave of the future. And one of the interesting things about it is when you compare the per mileage costs, electric is the equivalent of about getting a gallon of gas for $1.80.
Interesting.
So it's really cost effective. So I think we're going to see more and more electric vehicles in
I've
the future.
been issued a government vehicle. It's a hybrid, but I don't use it to drive daily. I just use it when I need to take a road trip once in a while, say to Taos, and it feels almost like it's going to stall, but I guess that's when the engine turns off or stops using the gas.
That's right, and that's the problems with electric vehicles in some people's minds are they're so quiet that people think they're not,
stalled.
Well, or they're stalled or they're not powerful. And in fact, back 100 years ago, people equated exhaust pollution and noise with progress. And so the electric vehicles didn't have either of those. They were completely quiet, and so people just thought they weren't real enough. And so anyhow, that's a good point
And
with
briefly,
them.
what would you tell the audience if you had something to say, to encourage them to get off, or not, they shouldn't say get off the grid, but this new energy plan? What would you say to the audience?
Well, I would basically say think about energy efficiency. There's a number of really inexpensive, simple things you can do at home to reduce your propane
Oh, we could have
and
talked
your
about
natural
that.
gas bills. I mean, energy efficiency is a whole nother topic.
Conserve.
And I work in Santa Fe County, where a lot of our customer citizens are on propane, and that's
That's
really
nice.
an opportunity there. But
Great.
close with think about solar. It makes a lot of sense, and
You're awesome.
it's not
You've
only
been-
doing the right thing, but thanks for having me. I
You
really
bet.
enjoy being on your
Let's
show.
do it again. Let's have a part
Absolutely.
2. Thank you for watching our program. If you'd like to be on our program, please call me at 827-4533. And thank you for watching. I hope you found this beneficial.